The research ship Hanbok drifted silently through the dark void of space. Captain Lee So-jin stood on the bridge watching the stars through the main view screen. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform was neat and clean. To anyone looking at her, she seemed like just another human officer doing her job, but So-jin carried a secret that would shake the galaxy if anyone knew the truth. She walked over to the navigation station where Lieutenant Park Hyun-woo was checking their current position. Hyun-woo was her first officer and had served with her for 3 years. He was smart and loyal, and So-jin trusted him more than anyone else on the ship. "How much longer until we reach the research station?" So-jin asked. Hyun-woo looked up from his console. "About 6 hours, Captain. The new mineral samples from the asteroid field should keep Dr. Kim busy for weeks." So-jin nodded and tried to smile, but her heart felt heavy. She had been running from her past for 5 long years. Every day she woke up hoping she could forget what she had done. Every night she went to sleep promising herself she would never use her power again. The bridge door opened and Dr. Kim Nari walked in carrying a data pad. Nari was the ship's chief medical officer and xenobiologist. She was also So-jin's closest friend, though Nari did not know all of So-jin's secrets. "Captain, I have the crew health reports ready for your review," Nari said with a warm smile. "Everyone is in good condition. No problems to report." "Thank you, Dr. Kim," So-jin replied. She took the data pad, but her hands shook slightly. Nari noticed, but did not say anything. The 3 officers stood in comfortable silence for a moment. So-jin looked around the bridge at her crew. There were 12 people total on the Hanbok. All of them trusted her to keep them safe. All of them believed she was just a normal human captain. If only they knew what she really was. 5 years ago, So-jin had been a different person. She was Lieutenant Commander Lee So-jin, then serving on a military battleship. She was part of a special operations unit that handled the most dangerous missions. Back then she thought her psychic abilities were a gift that would help her protect humanity. She was wrong. Very wrong. The mission was supposed to be simple. Intelligence reports said a small enemy fleet was planning to attack a human colony. So-jin's unit was sent to stop them before they could hurt innocent people. She remembered feeling confident and ready to fight, but when the battle started, everything went wrong. The enemy had more ships than expected. Her unit was outnumbered and outgunned. Her friends were dying around her. The colony ships full of families were trying to escape, but the enemy was hunting them down. So-jin had felt the rage building inside her. She had felt her psychic power growing stronger and stronger. She tried to control it, but fear and anger made it impossible. When she finally lost control, the results were terrible. Every enemy ship in the area simply stopped existing, not destroyed or damaged. They just disappeared completely as if they had never been there at all. The psychic blast was so powerful it created a hole in space itself. 30,000 enemy soldiers died in less than a second. So-jin had saved the colony, but the cost was too high. She had become something monstrous, something that could erase life with a single thought. The military tried to convince her that what she did was necessary, but So-jin knew better. No one should have that kind of power. That was when she made her promise. She would bury her abilities so deep that she would never use them again. She requested transfer to the research division, where she could help people in peaceful ways. She told herself that Lee So-jin, the weapon, was dead. Captain Lee So-jin, the scientist, would take her place. "Captain," Hyun-woo's voice broke through her dark memories. "We're receiving a distress signal." So-jin blinked and focused on the present. "What kind of signal?" Hyun-woo's fingers moved quickly over his console. His expression grew serious. "It's coming from the mining colony at New Busan. They're reporting an attack. Multiple hostile ships. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Nari moved closer to look at the display. New Busan has over 3,000 people living there, mostly families of the miners. So-jin felt ice forming in her stomach. "How far away are we?" 2 hours at maximum speed, Hyun-woo replied. "But Captain, our ship is not equipped for combat or large-scale evacuations. We should contact the nearest military base and request backup." "That would take at least 8 hours, Nari said quietly. By then, she did not need to finish. Everyone on the bridge knew what happened to human colonies when hostile aliens attacked them. The lucky ones died quickly. The others were taken as slaves or worse. So-jin closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. This was exactly the kind of situation she had been avoiding for 5 years. A situation where people would die unless she acted. A situation where her buried power might be the only thing that could save innocent lives. But she had made a promise. She had sworn to never use her abilities again no matter what happened. The power inside her was too dangerous. If she let it out even a little bit, she might lose control again. She might become the monster she had been before. "Captain," Yunwoo said gently. "Orders?" So-jin opened her eyes and looked at the worried faces of her crew. Then she thought about the 3,000 people at New Busan. Families with children who were probably hiding in shelters right now, praying for someone to save them. Her hands clenched into fists. The promise she made 5 years ago suddenly felt very heavy. "Set course for New Busan," she said finally. "Maximum speed," Hyunwoo's eyes widened. "Captain, are you sure? We don't have the resources for a rescue mission of this scale." "We have to try," So-jin replied. Deep inside her mind, she felt something stirring. Something powerful and dangerous that had been sleeping for years. She pushed it back down and hoped it would stay buried. But as the hanbok changed course and accelerated toward the distress signal, So-jin could not shake the feeling that her peaceful life was about to end. Destiny had been patient with her for 5 years. Now it was calling her back to the fight she had tried so hard to escape. The stars ahead grew brighter as they approached New Busan. Somewhere in that system, people were dying. Somewhere in that system, her past was waiting for her. Captain Lee So-jin gripped the back of her chair and prepared to face whatever was coming. She just hoped she could save the colony without becoming the monster again. She hoped her promise would be strong enough to keep the darkness locked away. But deep down, she already knew the truth. Some promises were impossible to keep when innocent lives were at stake. The hanbok dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Busan system. Captain So-jin stared at the main screen as the sensors began picking up signals. What she saw made her blood run cold. 3 massive alien warships hung in orbit around the mining colony. Their dark hulls were covered with weapon ports and armor plating. These were Vorthak Empire battle cruisers built for one purpose: conquest and destruction. "My God," Dr. Nari whispered from behind her. "Those ships are huge." Hyunwoo was already working at his station pulling up tactical data. "Captain, the lead ship is twice the size of anything in our fleet. Each one of those cruisers carries enough firepower to level a city." So-jin watched as smaller Vorthak fighters swarmed around the colony like angry insects. Explosions bloomed on the surface as the aliens bombed key installations. The mining facilities were already burning and thick smoke covered large areas of the main settlement. "Are you detecting any life signs?" So-jin asked. "Yes, Captain," the sensor officer replied. "I'm reading approximately 2,500 human life signs scattered across the colony. Most are concentrated in the underground shelters." So-jin felt a small relief. At least some people were still alive. "But for how long?" The communications officer looked up from her station. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the surface. It's Colonel Choi Min-ho, the colony's defense coordinator." "Put him through," So-jin ordered. The main screen changed to show a man in his 50s wearing a damaged military uniform. His face was covered with dirt and blood, and his eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much death. Behind him, So-jin could see the inside of what looked like a concrete bunker. Other people were moving around in the background, including several children. "This is Colonel Choi Min-ho of New Busan Colony," the man said. His voice was steady but strained. "Thank God someone received our distress call. We need immediate evacuation assistance. Colonel, this is Captain Lee So-jin of the research vessel Hanbok. What is your current situation?" Choi's expression grew grim. "The Vorthak hit us 2 hours ago without warning. They destroyed our orbital defense platforms first, then started bombing the surface. We managed to get most civilians into the emergency shelters, but the aliens are systematically hunting down anyone who tries to escape." "How many people do you have down there?" So-jin asked. "About 2,500 in the main shelter complex. Another few hundred scattered in smaller bunkers across the colony. The Vorthak commander sent us a message demanding surrender. He gave us 6 hours before they start executing prisoners." Nari stepped forward. "Colonel, we're a research ship with limited capacity. We can maybe evacuate 300 people at most." Choi closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, So-jin saw the weight of impossible choices. "Captain, any help you can give us will be appreciated. The children should go first. We have over 400 kids down here." So-jin felt her chest tighten. 400 children trapped underground while alien monsters prepared to slaughter them. She looked at the tactical display showing the 3 massive enemy warships. Her small research vessel would be destroyed in seconds if it tried to fight those monsters. But she could not just leave those people to die. "Colonel, can your defense systems hold out a little longer?" she asked. "Maybe 2 hours if we're lucky. The Vorthak are bringing up heavy drilling equipment to break through our shelter doors. Once they get inside—" He did not need to finish. Hyunwoo moved closer to Sojin and spoke quietly. "Captain, this is suicide. We can't fight those ships. We should call for military backup and hope they arrive in time." "The nearest battle group is 8 hours away," Sojin replied. "These people will be dead by then." "Better than all of us being dead," Hyunwoo said. "Captain, I understand your desire to help, but we have to be realistic. Our ship has no weapons and no shields worth mentioning. If we go down there, we'll just be adding our names to the casualty list." Nari joined the conversation. "What if we don't fight? What if we just try to evacuate as many as possible and run? The Vorthak fighters will hunt us down before we get 10 people off the surface," Hyunwoo explained. "Captain, please. I know this is hard, but we have to think about our own crew too." Sojin looked around the bridge at her officers. She could see the conflict in their faces. They wanted to help the colonists, but they also wanted to live. It was a reasonable position, a smart position, but all Sojin could think about were those 400 children hiding in underground shelters waiting for death to find them. She thought about her promise. She had sworn to never use her power again no matter what happened. The psychic abilities buried deep in her mind were too dangerous. If she lost control again, she might kill everyone, including the people she was trying to save. But what was the alternative? Let innocent families die while she ran away to safety? Let children be butchered by alien monsters because she was afraid of what she might become? "Captain," Colonel Choi's voice came from the speaker. "I'm reading Vorthak landing craft approaching our position. They're starting their final assault." On the screen behind Choi, people were running back and forth. Sojin could hear shouting and the sound of heavy machinery getting closer. A child started crying somewhere in the background. That sound broke something inside Sojin's chest. She thought about all the promises she had made to herself over the years. Promises to stay hidden, promises to live a quiet life, promises to never again become the weapon she had been before. But she had made other promises too. When she became a Starfleet officer, she had sworn to protect innocent life. When she accepted command of the Hanbok, she had promised to serve humanity with honor and courage. Which promise mattered more? Sojin straightened her shoulders and looked at her crew. "All hands prepare for combat operations." "We're going down there." Hyunwoo's eyes widened. "Captain, that's an order, Hyunwoo. Plot a course for the colony's main landing pad. Full speed." "Ma'am, our weapons won't even scratch their armor." "Then we'll have to get creative." Sojin turned to the communications officer. "Send a message to Colonel Choi. Tell him help is on the way." As the Hanbok accelerated toward New Busan, Sojin felt the thing inside her mind stirring again. The power she had kept buried for 5 years was waking up. It could sense the approaching battle. It wanted to be free. Not yet, she told herself. Maybe she could save the colonists without using her abilities. Maybe she could keep her promise intact, but deep in her heart she already knew the truth. Some situations could not be solved with conventional methods. Sometimes the only way to save innocent lives was to risk becoming a monster. The Vorthak warships grew larger on the screen as the Hanbok dove toward the colony. Somewhere in those underground shelters, children were counting on her to save them. Sojin gripped the arms of her captain's chair and prepared to break the most important promise she had ever made. The Hanbok shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of New Busan. Captain Sojin watched the tactical display as Vorthak fighters immediately changed course to intercept them. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge as enemy weapons locked onto their position. "Evasive maneuvers," Sojin ordered. "Get us to the surface in one piece." Hyunwoo's hands flew over the navigation controls. The research ship twisted and rolled through the sky, avoiding bursts of plasma fire from the pursuing fighters. The hull groaned under the stress, but held together. "Landing pad is 2 minutes away, Captain," the pilot reported. "But we have company." On the main screen, Sojin could see 3 Vorthak fighters closing in behind them. Their sleek black hulls gleamed with weapon ports, and their engines left trails of green fire in the sky. "Return fire," Sojin commanded. "Captain, our weapons are designed for asteroid mining, not combat," Hyunwoo warned. "The mining lasers might not even penetrate their shields." "Fire anyway." Thin beams of red light lanced out from the handbuck, striking the nearest fighter. The enemy shields flared but held. The Vorthak pilot responded by unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts that hammered into the research ship's rear hull. Shields down to 60%, the tactical officer reported. Hull breach on Deck 7. Sojin gritted her teeth. This was exactly what she had feared. Her ship was no match for military vessels. But she could not turn back now. Too many lives depended on her. The handbuck burst through a cloud bank and the colony spread out below them. Sojin's heart sank at what she saw. Half the buildings were burning and the main administrative center had been reduced to rubble. Vorthak ground forces were everywhere, setting up heavy weapons and herding captured civilians into transport ships. "There's the landing pad," Hyunwoo called out, "but it's crawling with enemy soldiers." Sojin could see at least 50 Vorthak warriors surrounding the concrete platform. They wore heavy black armor and carried weapons that could punch through steel. Behind them, massive drilling machines were moving toward the underground shelter entrances. "Set us down anyway," Sojin ordered. "Emergency landing if you have to." The Hanbok dropped toward the landing pad, trailing smoke from its damaged engines. The Vorthak soldiers below opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts and energy beams struck the ship's hull, leaving glowing craters in the metal. "Shields failing," the tactical officer shouted over the noise of alarms. "We're sitting ducks down there, Captain." Sojin knew he was right. The moment they landed, the Vorthak would swarm them. Her crew would be dead within minutes, but she could see the entrance to the main shelter just 200 meters away. If they could reach it, maybe they could buy the colonists a little more time. The ship hit the landing pad hard, bouncing twice before coming to rest. Through the view screen, Sojin could see Vorthak soldiers running toward them from all directions. Their leader was a massive alien wearing ornate armor covered with battle scars. This had to be War Commander Thexavar himself. "All hands prepare to abandon ship," Sojin announced over the intercom. "We're making a run for the shelter." Dr. Nari appeared on the bridge carrying a medical kit and a plasma rifle. "Captain, this is insane. We should surrender and hope they take prisoners." "The Vorthak don't take human prisoners," Sojin replied grimly. "They take slaves. Is that what you want for those children down there?" Nari's face went pale, but she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Get to the shelter and help with the wounded. Hyunwoo and I will cover the retreat." The crew of 12 moved quickly through the ship, gathering weapons and supplies. Most of them were scientists, not soldiers, but they had trained for emergency situations. Sojin felt a surge of pride watching them prepare to risk their lives for strangers. The airlock opened and immediately plasma bolts began striking the metal around the exit. Sojin peered out and saw that the Vorthak had formed a battle line between the ship and the shelter entrance. There was no way to reach it without crossing 200 meters of open ground under heavy fire. "Captain," Hyunwoo said quietly, "this isn't going to work. They have us completely surrounded." Before Sojin could reply, an explosion rocked the area. One of the shelter entrances had been blown open by Vorthak demolition charges. Through the smoke, she could see alien soldiers pouring into the underground complex. Screams echoed across the landing pad as civilians tried to flee. "Move now," Sojin shouted. Her crew charged out of the airlock, firing their mining lasers at the enemy line. The Vorthak returned fire with military-grade weapons that far outclassed anything the humans carried. Within seconds, 2 of Sojin's officers went down with serious wounds. Sojin dragged one of the injured men behind a piece of concrete debris. Dr. Nari appeared beside her and immediately began treating the wound. All around them, plasma fire lit up the air like deadly fireworks. "Captain, look," Hyunwoo called out. Sojin followed his gaze and saw something that made her blood freeze. A group of Vorthak soldiers had captured a dozen human children and were forcing them to walk in front of their advance. The aliens were using kids as human shields. One of the children stumbled and fell. A Vorthak warrior raised his weapon to execute the small girl, but Nari suddenly broke cover and ran toward them. "No!" the doctor screamed. "Leave her alone!" Nari threw herself over the fallen child just as the alien fired. The plasma bolt meant for the girl struck Nari in the chest instead. The doctor collapsed, bleeding heavily onto the concrete. Something inside Sojin's mind snapped. She had watched her crew get shot. She had seen innocent civilians murdered. But watching Nari sacrifice herself to save a child was too much. All the rage and fear and helplessness that had been building inside her suddenly found a crack in the walls she had built around her power. For just one moment, her mental barriers faltered. The psychic energy that erupted from Sojin was like nothing the Vorthak had ever encountered. An invisible wave of force spread out from her position, disabling every alien weapon in a 50-meter radius. The advanced plasma rifles simply stopped working as their internal circuits fried. Several Vorthak soldiers screamed and collapsed, clutching their heads as psychic feedback overloaded their nervous systems. War Commander Thexvar himself staggered backward as his combat armor sparked and failed. The massive alien looked at Sojin with something that might have been fear. The wave of power lasted only 3 seconds, but it was enough. The surviving humans reached the shelter entrance carrying their wounded. Sojin helped drag Nari's unconscious form into the underground complex, just as the heavy blast doors sealed shut. In the medical section of the shelter, Sojin knelt beside Nari's still form. The doctor was alive but badly hurt. Her breathing was shallow and her pulse was weak. "She saved that little girl," one of the colonists whispered. "Your friend saved my daughter." Sojin looked around the crowded shelter at the faces staring back at her. There were over 2,000 people packed into the underground complex. Men and women and children all looking to her for answers she did not have. But some of them had seen what happened outside. She could tell by the way they looked at her that they knew she was different. The secret she had kept for 5 years was starting to unravel. Hyunwoo appeared beside her, looking confused and suspicious. "Captain, what happened out there?" The Vorthak weapons just stopped working, all of them at the same time. Sojin met his eyes and saw the questions he was afraid to ask. Her first officer was smart enough to know that weapons did not just fail by coincidence. He was starting to understand that his captain was not what she appeared to be. Above them, the sound of drilling resumed as the Vorthak began working to break through the blast doors. Sojin estimated they had maybe 2 hours before the aliens broke in and slaughtered everyone in the shelter. 2 hours to figure out how to save 2,500 people with no weapons and no way to escape. 2 hours before she would have to decide whether to break her promise completely or watch everyone she cared about die. The underground shelter shook as another explosion echoed from above. Captain Sojin sat beside Dr. Nari's unconscious form in the makeshift medical area. The doctor was stable but still very weak. Her sacrifice to save that little girl had cost her dearly. Colonel Choi approached with grim news written on his face. "Captain, the Vorthak have brought in heavier drilling equipment. Our blast doors won't hold for more than an hour." Sojin nodded but said nothing. Around them, families huddled together in the dim emergency lighting. Children whispered questions their parents could not answer. Everyone knew they were trapped with no way out. Hyunwoo appeared at Sojin's side carrying a damaged communication device. "Captain, I've been monitoring Vorthak transmissions. They're not just here for slaves. They're specifically looking for someone." "What do you mean?" Sojin asked. "They keep mentioning a high-value target, someone they call the Phantom Weapon. War Commander Thexvar has orders to capture this person alive." Sojin felt ice forming in her stomach. After 5 years of hiding, her secret was finally catching up with her. "Do they know who they're looking for?" "Not yet. But Captain, what happened outside with their weapons failing? That wasn't normal. I've served with you for 3 years and I've never seen anything like it." Before Sojin could answer, the shelter's main communication system crackled to life. The screen showed the bridge of a human heavy cruiser. An older man in Admiral's uniform looked out at them with tired eyes. "This is Admiral Kang Tae-sung of the Soul's Pride. We received your distress signal and are moving to assist." Colonel Choi stepped forward. "Admiral, this is Colonel Choi Min-ho. We have 2,500 civilians trapped underground. The Vorthak are about to break through our defenses. Hold on, Colonel. My battle group will be there in 30 minutes. Sojin's heart jumped when she heard the Admiral's name. Tae-sung had been her commanding officer 5 years ago during her military service. He was the only person alive who knew the full truth about what she had done. Their eyes met across the communication link and Sojin saw recognition flash across his face. Tae-sung's expression became very serious. "Colonel, I need to speak with Captain Lee Sojin privately. Transfer her to a secure channel." Choi looked confused but activated the private communication booth. Sojin stepped inside and the door sealed behind her. Admiral Tae-sung's face filled the small screen. "Hello, Sojin," he said quietly. "It's been a long time, Admiral. I didn't expect to see you again. The galaxy is full of surprises. I heard about what happened outside the shelter. 50 Vorthak weapons failing at exactly the same moment. That sounds familiar." Sojin closed her eyes. "It was an accident. I lost control for just a few seconds. I know you did. But Sojin, we have bigger problems now. The Vorthak aren't here by chance. Intelligence reports indicate they've been hunting for the phantom weapon for months. Somehow they traced the energy signature from your old battle site. That's impossible. It happened 5 years ago. Psychic energy that powerful leaves marks in space-time itself. The Vorthak have new scanning technology that can detect those marks. They know someone with incredible abilities was at that battle. Now they want to find that person." Sojin felt her world crashing down around her. "How many people know about your true capabilities?" "Just me and a few intelligence officers. But Sojin, the situation has changed dramatically. We need to talk about bringing you back to active duty." "No." The word came out harder than she intended. "I made a promise. I'll never use those abilities again." Taesung's expression became grave. "The Vorthak Empire has formed an alliance with the Krell Federation and the Nexus Collective. Together they call themselves the Trinity Coalition. They have over 1,000 warships now and they're moving against human space. Our military can handle them. No, we can't. We've already lost 3 major colonies and 2 battle fleets. Conventional weapons aren't enough anymore, Sojin. We need something that can turn the tide." Sojin shook her head. "You don't understand what I am. What I become when I use my power. I'm not a weapon. I'm a disaster waiting to happen. You saved 30,000 civilians at the Battle of Arcturus. I killed 30,000 enemy soldiers in 3 seconds. Their ships didn't explode or burn. They just stopped existing. Do you understand how terrifying that is?" Before Taesung could reply, alarms started blaring throughout the shelter. The blast doors were failing under the Vorthak assault. Sojin could hear the whine of drilling equipment getting closer. "Captain," Hyunwoo's voice came through the intercom. "We need you out here now." Sojin looked back at Admiral Taesung. "I have to go." "Sojin, wait. There's something else you need to know. The Trinity Coalition isn't just attacking random targets. They're specifically hunting for human psychics. They want to study our abilities and find ways to counter them. How many psychics do we have in service, including you? Maybe a dozen with any real combat potential. The rest are barely stronger than normal humans." The communication booth door opened and Hyunwoo stuck his head inside. "Captain, the doors are about to fail. Everyone's looking to you for orders." Sojin stepped out of the booth and found herself face to face with Dr. Nari. The doctor was awake but leaning heavily on a medical support frame. "Captain," Nari said weakly, "I heard part of your conversation with the Admiral. You're not just a research officer, are you?" Sojin looked at her closest friend and saw the hurt in her eyes. "Nari, I can explain. You have psychic abilities. That's how you disabled the Vorthak weapons. That's why you always seem different from other officers." Before Sojin could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "She's right, isn't she, Captain?" Sojin turned to see Hyunwoo standing behind her with his arms crossed. Several other crew members were gathered nearby, listening to every word. 3 years I've served with you," Hyunwoo continued. 3 years wondering why a brilliant officer like you was stuck commanding a research ship. Why you never talked about your military service. Why you sometimes got that haunted look when we discussed combat situations. Hyunwoo, please. No, Captain. These people deserve the truth. We're all going to die down here unless someone does something miraculous, and miracles seem to be your specialty. The sound of metal tearing echoed through the shelter. The blast doors were finally giving way. Through the gap, Sojin could see Vorthak soldiers preparing to storm the complex. Colonel Choi ran up to them, breathing hard. "Captain, they're through the outer barrier. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach the main shelter." Sojin looked around at the faces staring back at her. Her crew, the colonists, hundreds of children who would be dead or enslaved within the hour, all of them looking to her for salvation she was afraid to give. Nari stepped closer despite her injuries. "Captain, whatever you are, whatever you've done in the past doesn't matter now. These people need you. You don't understand what I could become. I understand that you're the only hope these families have." Hyunwoo nodded. "Captain, I've followed your orders for 3 years without question. I trust your judgment. If you have abilities that can save these people, then use them." The shelter shook again as more Vorthak soldiers poured through the broken barriers. Plasma fire began lighting up the outer corridors. The sound of screaming grew closer. So-Jin closed her eyes and felt the power stirring deep inside her mind. It had been waiting patiently for 5 years, waiting for her to need it again, waiting for her to accept what she really was. When she opened her eyes again, her crew was still watching her with expressions of trust and hope. They believed in her even knowing she had lied to them for years. "All right," she said quietly. "Everyone get behind the emergency blast barriers. This is going to be dangerous." As the colonists scrambled for cover, So-Jin walked toward the main corridor where Vorthak soldiers were advancing. Behind her, she could hear Hyunwoo organizing the defense and Nari treating the wounded. These people had become her family over the years. They trusted her to protect them. Maybe it was time to stop running from what she was and start using her gifts for the right reasons. The first Vorthak soldier rounded the corner and raised his weapon. So-Jin looked at him and smiled. It was time to remind the galaxy why humans were dangerous. Captain So-Jin walked down the dark corridor toward the advancing Vorthak soldiers. Behind her, the colonists had taken shelter behind emergency barriers, but she could still hear children crying. The sound made her heart ache. The first alien warrior she encountered was massive even by Vorthak standards. His black armor was covered with battle scars and his weapon glowed with deadly energy. When he saw So-Jin approaching alone, he laughed through his helmet speaker. "One small human woman," the warrior said in broken English. "You think to stop the might of the Vorthak Empire?" So-Jin stopped 10 meters away and looked at him calmly. "I think you should leave these people alone." More Vorthak soldiers appeared behind the first one. Soon there were 20 alien warriors filling the corridor with their weapons trained on So-Jin. Their leader spoke into his communicator calling for reinforcements. "The human commander has surrendered," he reported. "We will take her alive as ordered." "I haven't surrendered," So-Jin said quietly. The warrior tilted his armored head. "Then you choose death." "Very well." He raised his plasma rifle, but before he could fire, So-Jin did something that changed everything. She stopped fighting the power inside her mind. After 5 years of keeping it buried, she finally let it free. The psychic energy that erupted from So-Jin was like a storm made of pure thought. It rolled down the corridor in waves that the Vorthak could not see but definitely felt. Their advanced weapons simply stopped working as the energy disrupted every electronic system within 50 meters. But So-Jin was not finished. This time she maintained control as the power flowed through her. She reached out with her mind and touched each Vorthak soldier individually. She did not kill them, but she made sure they would not be hurting anyone for a very long time. The 20 warriors collapsed to the ground unconscious. Their armor sparked and failed as the psychic energy overloaded the circuits. In less than 10 seconds, the corridor was clear of threats. So-Jin stood among the fallen enemies, breathing hard. The power was still flowing through her, but it felt different this time. Instead of the wild destruction from 5 years ago, she had maintained perfect control. She had protected the innocent without becoming a monster. "My God," Colonel Choi whispered from behind the barriers. "What did you just do?" Before So-Jin could answer, her communicator crackled to life. War Commander Thexavar's voice filled the corridor with barely controlled rage. "Human Phantom," the alien commander said. "We know what you are now. Surrender yourself or we will execute every colonist one by one." So-Jin picked up the communicator from one of the unconscious soldiers. "This is Captain Lee So-Jin. I'm the one you're looking for." "Indeed you are. The phantom weapon that destroyed our fleet at Arcturus. We have been searching for you for many months." "Well, now you've found me. What do you want?" "You will come aboard my ship immediately. Any delay will result in the death of human prisoners we have already captured." So-Jin's blood went cold. "What prisoners?" "We collected over 300 humans from the surface before you arrived. Men, women, and children currently locked in our holding cells. Surrender yourself within 1 hour, or they all die." The communication ended, leaving So-Jin staring at the dead device in her hands. Around her, the colonists were emerging from their hiding places, looking at her with a mixture of fear and hope. Hyunwoo appeared at her side. "Captain, you can't trust him. Even if you surrender, he'll kill those prisoners anyway." "Maybe. But I can't take that chance." Dr. Nari limped over, still weak from her injuries. "So-Jin, there has to be another way. You have incredible power now. Can't you use it to rescue the prisoners?" So-Jin looked at her friend and shook her head. "The Vorthak ships are in orbit. Even with my abilities, I can't reach that far." "Actually, Captain," Colonel Choi interrupted, "there might be a way. We have a shuttle bay connected to this complex. If you could get to orbit, before he could finish explaining, alarms started blaring again. But these were different alarms. These were coming from above ground. Admiral Tae-sung's voice came over the emergency broadcast system. All personnel take cover. We are engaging Vorthak forces in orbit. Through the shelter's communication system, they could see what was happening in space. The Soul's Pride and 2 escort cruisers had arrived and were battling the 3 Vorthak warships. Explosions bloomed between the vessels as they exchanged fire at close range. So-jin watched the battle with growing worry. The human ships were outnumbered and outgunned. Even as she watched, one of the escort cruisers took a direct hit and began venting atmosphere. The Admiral's ship is in trouble, Hyun-woo observed. Those Vorthak cruisers are too heavily armed. Suddenly, the Soul's Pride shuddered under multiple impacts. On the screen, So-jin could see that the ship's main engines were failing. Admiral Tae-sung appeared on the communication channel with smoke and sparks visible behind him. All ships, this is Admiral Tae-sung. We've lost primary power and weapons are offline. We're sitting ducks up here. So-jin felt something break inside her chest as she watched her old commanding officer's ship being torn apart. Tae-sung had risked everything to come help her, and now he was going to die because she had been too afraid to act. Captain, Nari said softly, you can save them. You can save everyone. So-jin looked around the shelter at all the faces watching her. These people had become her family over the years. They trusted her to protect them, even knowing what she really was. She thought about her promise from 5 years ago. The vow to never use her power no matter what happened. She had kept that promise even when it meant watching people suffer. But maybe some promises were meant to be broken when innocent lives were at stake. Colonel Choi, she said, show me to that shuttle bay. 10 minutes later, So-jin stood in the small launch facility deep beneath the colony. A single-person scout ship sat on the launch pad ready for takeoff. It was not much, but it would get her to orbit. Captain, this is insane, Hyun-woo said for the 10th time. You can't fight 3 warships by yourself. I'm not fighting them, So-jin replied as she climbed into the pilot's seat. I'm going to make them stop fighting. What does that mean? So-jin looked at her first officer and smiled. It means I'm finally going to stop being afraid of what I am. The scout ship launched through a hidden tunnel that emerged on the far side of the colony. So-jin piloted the small craft straight up through the atmosphere toward the battle raging in orbit. As she approached the combat zone, she could see that the situation was desperate. The Soul's Pride was drifting helplessly while Vorthak fighters swarmed around it like deadly insects. The remaining human cruiser was fighting 3 enemies at once and losing badly. So-jin closed her eyes and let her power flow freely for the first time in 5 years. She reached out with her mind across the vast distances of space and touched every ship in the battle zone. But this time she did not destroy anything. Instead, she simply turned off every weapon system on every Vorthak vessel. Plasma cannons went dead. Missile launchers failed to respond. Energy shields collapsed as their generators shut down. The effect was instant and complete. In less than 30 seconds, the most advanced alien warships in the galaxy had been reduced to helpless metal hulks drifting in space. So-jin opened her eyes and spoke into the communication system that connected her to every ship in the area. War Commander Thexvar, this is Captain Lee So-jin. You wanted to meet the Phantom weapon. Here I am. The response came quickly, filled with shocked disbelief. Impossible. You are one small human in a tiny ship. I'm the human who killed your fleet at Arcturus. I'm the one who just disabled your entire battle group without firing a single shot. Now let's discuss the release of those prisoners. As her scout ship drifted among the powerless Vorthak vessels, So-jin felt something she had not experienced in 5 years. She felt proud of her abilities instead of ashamed of them. She had finally learned the difference between having power and being powerful. Real power was not about destruction. It was about protection. It was about standing between evil and innocence and saying no. The Phantom weapon was dead. Captain Lee So-jin, the Protector, had taken her place. 3 days after the Battle of New Busan, the galaxy had changed forever. Captain So-jin sat in the briefing room aboard the Soul's Pride, listening to intelligence reports that seemed impossible to believe. Her single demonstration of power had sent shockwaves across every inhabited system. Admiral Tae-sung stood at the front of the room, pointing to a galactic map covered with blinking lights. Each light represented a fleet movement or political development triggered by what happened in orbit around the mining colony. The Trinity Coalition has recalled over half They're forces from the front lines, Taesung explained. Their military commanders are conducting emergency strategy meetings to figure out how to counter a single human who can disable entire fleets. Commander Park Hyun-woo leaned forward in his chair. What about the Vorthak prisoners we captured? Have they said anything useful? War Commander Thexvar is refusing to talk, but some of his officers are more cooperative. They're calling Sojin the Mind Witch. According to them, no species in galactic history has ever demonstrated psychic abilities on this scale. Dr. Kim Nari was still recovering from her injuries, but she had insisted on attending the briefing. Admiral, what about the human response? How are our own people reacting to the news? Taesung's expression grew troubled. That's more complicated. Some colonies are celebrating and calling Sojin a hero. Others are demanding that she be placed under military control for the safety of everyone. Sojin had been quiet throughout the briefing, but now she spoke up. They're afraid of me. Can't say I blame them. Captain, Hyun-woo said, you saved thousands of lives. You stopped 3 enemy warships without killing a single enemy soldier. How can anyone see that as dangerous? Because they know what I could do if I wanted to hurt people instead of help them. The briefing room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Sojin could disable entire fleets with a thought. What would happen if she ever lost control or decided to use her power for conquest instead of protection? Admiral Taesung activated another display showing news broadcasts from across human space. Politicians were giving speeches about the need for oversight of psychic individuals. Scientists were demanding to study Sojin's abilities. Military leaders were arguing about whether she should be given her own fleet or locked away in a secure facility. The president wants to meet with you, Taesung said. She's calling an emergency session of the Colonial Council to discuss how to handle this situation. What situation? Sojin asked. I haven't threatened anyone. You exist. That's enough to make people nervous. Dr. Nari shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Admiral, what about the other human psychics in military service? Are they being affected by this? Every psychic officer in the fleet has been recalled for evaluation. Some are being reassigned to non-combat duties. Others are requesting transfers to avoid the attention. Sojin felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Her decision to use her abilities was causing problems for innocent people who just wanted to serve their species. She stood up and walked to the viewport looking out at the stars. There's something else, Taesung continued. Long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements from beyond the galactic rim. The Coalition isn't just repositioning their existing forces. They're calling in reinforcements from their home territories. Hyun-woo studied the tactical displays. How many ships are we talking about? Conservative estimates put it at over 2,000 vessels. They're assembling the largest invasion fleet in recorded history. Because of me, Sojin said quietly without turning from the viewport. Because you've shown them that humans are more dangerous than they thought. They're not just fighting for territory anymore. Now they're fighting for survival. The door to the briefing room opened and a young communications officer entered carrying an urgent message pad. Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from Earth-Mars and 6 other core worlds. The Coalition has launched simultaneous attacks on civilian targets. Sojin spun around from the viewport. What kind of attacks? The communications officer consulted his pad. Bombardment of agricultural centers, transportation hubs, and power generation facilities. They're not targeting military installations. They're going after infrastructure that supports civilian populations. Admiral Taesung studied the incoming reports with growing alarm. This is a new strategy. They're trying to force us into impossible choices. What do you mean? Nari asked. They're betting that Sojin won't use her full power if it means innocent civilians might get hurt. Attack civilian targets and either she responds with devastating force that could cause collateral damage, or she holds back and lets people die. Sojin felt her hands clenching into fists. The Coalition was using her own compassion against her. They knew she would not risk civilian lives even to save more civilians elsewhere. How long do we have? She asked. The attacks are happening now. Earth's orbital stations are reporting massive damage. Mars colony is requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Sojin closed her eyes and reached out with her mind across the vast distances of space. Even from here she could sense the death and destruction spreading across human territory. Millions of innocent people were in danger, and traditional military response would take days to organize. When she opened her eyes again, everyone in the briefing room was staring at her. They could all see the internal struggle playing out on her face. the weight of an entire species resting on her shoulders. "Captain," Hyunwoo said softly, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that maybe it's time to stop worrying about what might happen and start dealing with what is happening." Dr. Nari leaned forward. "So Jin, your abilities are still growing, aren't they? Every time you use them, they get stronger." So Jin nodded. "I can feel it. The power inside my mind is like a living thing. It wants to expand and explore and touch everything in the galaxy. Are you afraid of losing control? Every second of every day? But I'm more afraid of what happens if I don't act." Admiral Tae-sung walked over to stand beside her. "So Jin, I've known you for 8 years. You've always been someone who puts others before yourself. That hasn't changed. But what if it does change? What if having this much power corrupts me the way it corrupts everyone else? Then we'll deal with that problem when it comes. Right now, millions of people are dying and you're the only one who can save them." The communications officer cleared his throat. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition Fleet Commander. They're demanding to speak with Captain Lee specifically." "Put it through," Sojin said. The main screen activated, showing an alien she had never seen before. This was not a Vorthak warrior or any other species she recognized. The creature was tall and thin with pale blue skin and large black eyes. When it spoke, its voice was soft and cultured. "Captain Lee Sojin," the alien said. "I am Supreme Commander Veltar of the Trinity Coalition. We need to discuss terms." "What terms?" Sojin replied. "The terms of your surrender. You will present yourself to our forces within 12 hours. In exchange, we will cease all attacks on civilian targets. And if I refuse, then every human colony world will burn. We have sufficient forces to sterilize your entire species, Captain Lee. The only question is whether you care enough about your people to sacrifice yourself for them." The transmission ended, leaving the briefing room in stunned silence. Sojin looked around at the faces of her friends and colleagues, people who had stood by her even when they learned her darkest secrets. 12 hours, she said finally. "They're giving me 12 hours to decide the fate of humanity." Admiral Tae-sung put a hand on her shoulder. "So Jin, you don't have to face this alone. The entire human fleet will stand with you." "Against 2,000 ships? That's not a battle. That's a massacre. Then what do you suggest?" Sojin turned back to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, coalition forces were killing innocent people. Somewhere out there, an alien commander was waiting for her response. She thought about the promise she had made 5 years ago. She had sworn to bury her power and never use it to hurt anyone. But sometimes keeping one promise meant breaking another. Sometimes protecting the innocent required becoming something you never wanted to be. "I suggest," she said quietly, "that it's time for the Trinity Coalition to learn why humans are called the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Captain Sojin stood alone on the observation deck of the Soul's Pride watching the stars. In 4 hours, the Trinity Coalition's deadline would arrive. In 4 hours, she would have to make the choice that would decide the fate of humanity. Behind her, the door opened and Admiral Tae-sung entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Sojin and stood beside her in comfortable silence. "The fleet commanders are asking for orders," he said finally. "They want to know if we're preparing for battle or surrender." "What did you tell them?" "I told them to trust their captain," Sojin smiled sadly. "Even after everything I've done, you still believe in me. Especially after everything you've done. Sojin, in 30 years of military service, I've never met anyone with your sense of duty and honor. Having incredible power doesn't change who you are inside, doesn't it? I can feel the power growing stronger every day. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how easy it would be to solve problems by simply removing the people causing them." Tae-sung looked at her with concern. "But you don't act on those thoughts. Not yet. But what happens in 10 years? What happens in 50 years when I have even more power and even more responsibility? What happens when the easy solutions start looking like the right solutions?" Before Tae-sung could answer, the ship's communication system activated. Commander Hyunwoo's voice came through the speakers. "Captain, to the bridge, please. We have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace." So Jin and the Admiral rushed to the bridge where they found organized chaos. Officers were working frantically at their stations trying to track the massive fleet that had just arrived at the edge of the solar system. "Report," Sojin ordered. Hyunwoo looked up from the tactical display with awe and fear written on his face. "Captain, we're reading over 2,000 ships. Every class of vessel the Coalition has ever built. They've brought their entire military force." On the main screen, Sojin could see the enemy fleet spreading out in perfect formation. Massive dreadnoughts flanked by cruisers and destroyers with clouds of fighters providing escort. It was the largest concentration of military power in galactic history. Are they moving toward Earth? Sojin asked. No, Captain. They're holding position at the system's edge. We're receiving a transmission from their flagship. Put Supreme Commander Veltar through. The alien's pale blue face appeared on the screen, looking calm and confident. Behind him, Sojin could see the bridge of a ship larger than anything humans had ever built. Captain Lee, Veltar said politely, I trust you have considered our offer. Your time is nearly up. I've considered it, but I have a counter-offer for you. Indeed. How fascinating. Please proceed. Sojin stepped forward so the camera would focus on her face. Leave human space immediately. Return to your home territories and never threaten innocent civilians again. Do this and I'll let you go in peace. Veltar's expression showed what might have been amusement. Captain, you are facing the combined might of 3 galactic empires. Over 2,000 warships crewed by the finest military minds in known space. And you offer us terms as if you hold the superior position. I do hold the superior position. 1 human in 1 small fleet against the greatest armada ever assembled. Your confidence is admirable but misplaced. Sojin looked directly into the camera and spoke with quiet certainty. Commander Veltar, you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. You think this is about numbers? You think this is about ships and weapons and military strategy? But you're wrong. Then please enlighten me, Captain. What is this about? This is about the difference between conquest and protection. You've brought your fleet here to destroy and enslave. I'm here to defend the innocent. And in the end, that makes all the difference. Veltar's amusement faded. Your philosophical speeches will not save you, Captain. Surrender now or watch your species burn. No. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Outside the viewport, Sojin could see the Coalition fleet beginning to move. 2,000 ships accelerating toward Earth like a tide of death and destruction. Captain, Hyunwoo said quietly. What are your orders? Sojin closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. She could feel every ship in the Coalition fleet. She could sense the millions of alien soldiers preparing for battle. She could touch their weapons, their shields, their life support systems. For 5 years she had been afraid of her power, afraid of what she might become if she used it without restraint. But now, facing the destruction of everything she loved, she finally understood the truth. Power itself was not evil. What mattered was how you chose to use it. All ships pull back to defensive positions around Earth, she ordered. Protect the civilian evacuation ships, but do not engage the enemy fleet. Captain, what about you? Sojin walked to the bridge's forward viewport and placed her hands against the transparent metal. I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to stop running from my destiny. She reached out with her psychic abilities further than she had ever attempted before. Across the vast distances of space, her consciousness touched every Coalition vessel simultaneously. But this time she did not simply disable their weapons. This time she reached into the minds of every alien soldier and showed them something they had never experienced before. She showed them what it felt like to be human, the fierce protective love for family and home, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the innocent, the absolute refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. The effect was immediate and profound. Across the Coalition fleet, soldiers began laying down their weapons. Captains started questioning their orders. Entire ships broke formation as their crews experienced the full weight of human determination and compassion. But Sojin was not finished. She reached deeper into space, touching systems far beyond the solar system. Every Coalition facility, every military base, every occupied world, suddenly found their weapons and warships completely disabled. In less than 10 minutes, the greatest military force in galactic history had been rendered helpless by one human woman who refused to let innocent people die. Supreme Commander. Veltar appeared on the screen again, but his calm confidence was gone. What have you done? Our entire fleet is powerless. I've given you a choice, Sojin replied. You can continue trying to hurt innocent people, or you can go home and learn to live in peace with your neighbors. You cannot police the entire galaxy, Captain. Watch me. For the next several hours, Coalition ships began withdrawing from human space. Some went quietly. Others tried to fight but found their weapons would not respond. By the end of the day, the greatest invasion force in history was limping back to their home territories completely defeated. In the weeks that followed, The galaxy settled into an uneasy peace. The coalition species began negotiating treaties instead of planning conquests. Human colonies that had lived in fear for generations could finally focus on growth and exploration. So Jin stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Handbox Dream, watching her crew prepare for their next mission. These were not conquest or war, but exploration and peaceful contact with newly discovered species. Dr. Nari approached, carrying the latest reports from the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. Captain, we're receiving requests for assistance from 12 different systems. Some want help with natural disasters. Others are asking for mediation in territorial disputes. What's our status, Dr. Kim? All crew members are ready, Captain. We're prepared for whatever comes next. Commander Hyunwoo looked up from his station. Course plotted for the Andromeda sector. The new colonies there are requesting a diplomatic escort for first contact with the local species. Sojin nodded and settled into her captain's chair. Around her, the bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as her crew prepared for another peaceful mission. These people had followed her through impossible battles, and now they were helping her build a better future. Take us out, she ordered. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Sojin reflected on how far she had traveled from the woman who had made that promise 5 years ago. She had tried to bury her power, but destiny had other plans. Now she understood that true strength came not from hiding your abilities, but from using them wisely. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of wonders waiting to be discovered. With her friends beside her and her power focused on protection instead of destruction, Sojin was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had finally learned the most important lesson of all. Having great power did not make you a monster. What you chose to do with that power was what defined who you really were. And Captain Lee Sojin had chosen to be a guardian of peace in a galaxy that desperately needed hope.